do now, just like Ash. Do.
Oh, do we both do that? That's amazing.
Yes. She does it really funny. Do, and now I've started picking up on
That's
it too.
so funny. Anyway, we're recording now, and I want to just welcome everybody to our last office hours of 2025. This is relationship building for neurodivergent professionals. And we have the lovely Alex here from Neurodiversity Connection, who is an expert in helping neurodivergent folks, build connections, build relationships. She is a speech language pathologist as well. So we're very, very lucky to have her once again here. Just to introduce myself real quick, I am your host as usual. My name is Veronica, and I am the career coach behind Atypical Careers. So I am, as it implies, I help neurodivergent professionals navigate their careers. I help them figure out, get clarity as to what direction they should go in and come up with strategies as to how to actually get from point A to point B in a way that, really honors the way that your brain works and everything. So I'm very happy to be hosting this series here. And as I mentioned before, we have Alex, who is a neurodiversity affirming speech language pathologist and communication and connection coach, and the owner of Neurodiversity Connection, which is a really, really long title, but she has earned every bit of it. Alex, do you have anything that you want to say about yourself, just to introduce yourself to our audience today?
Sure. I have raging ADHD, so I'm sure that I will get off topic. I'm also fidgeting here, so hopefully nobody can hear that. If you can, please let me know. But otherwise, I'm just excited to come here and yap with you guys, and hopefully I love learning from you guys and then also teaching. But I mostly support neurodivergent adults who are struggling or wanting kind of more social connections in their life. I don't really teach social skills. I emphasize the strengths in your social communication as is, and then, teach some new strategies if you're looking to expand and build your social circle, whether that be with friends or potentially in dating or at work or just anywhere where you're looking to find new connections. So, yeah.
Amazing. So in just a moment, we are going to start going through some questions that have been submitted ahead of time. Of course, if you are just joining us here and you did not have a chance to submit a question in advance, you are more than welcome to use the chat feature to share your live questions, and we'll do our best to try and get to as many of them as we can today. But feel free to engage in the chat. That's where we're going to be, since the participants will have their cameras off and their microphones off and everything. So Alex, how do you feel? Are you ready to get started?
Yes, I'm so excited. This is like my jam to talk about. I could talk about this for hours.
This is your special interest. We could talk about this forever.
It is.
So, yeah, but we have an hour, so let's do that. I'm going to read out the first question here. The question is, I got in trouble the other day for asking too many questions to my manager, but they said to ask questions anytime when I first got hired. Now I feel like I've screwed everything up. What should I do? The classic conundrum of, should I ask the question? Should I ask the clarifying question? Am I going to annoy someone? And people don't really seem to be very honest when they say they have an open door policy, or they're welcome to ask questions. There seems to be some subtext in there. So maybe Alex, why don't you tell me what you make of this question?
Yeah, I feel like it's a really stupid social norm for people to just know how much communication is the right amount, right? And honestly, I think most people who get annoyed by over communication or under communication also tend to be part of the problem. So in this case, it sounds like the manager kind of created their own problem, right? But now, unfortunately, it's usually on the employee or the person below the manager that's being managed who kind of needs to think about how to solve the situation or resolve a problem if there's been some tension that's been created. I think in terms of advice, I think that clarity is always great. So if something is confusing, asking a question, I know that here it says asking too many, but I think admitting that, hey, I understand that maybe I've, overwhelmed with too much communication. I just want to make sure I'm being thorough, or like my style of communication is this. I would love if you could tell me like specifically what to CC you on, or what to include you on when I have questions or want more information. Whereas when it's appropriate to go to somebody else or just kind of resolve it. Another point that I think is really important here, though, is that just because somebody says something, unfortunately, doesn't mean that they mean it. And I think a general rule of thumb is like when you're being hired to do a job, the goal is for you to do something that makes it easier for the people around you, and probably your manager as well, to do their job rather than make it more difficult. And so I think that while asking a lot of questions, especially when you're brand new, makes a whole lot of sense because you're trying to get good at the role, showing that you are capable of being independent and like figuring out answers on your own is also typically a very desired trait in employees in general. So I think moving forward, like one piece of advice would be to try to get some gentle clarity and just saying like, hey, I'm so sorry if I've overwhelmed with too many questions. I tend to, like really clear instructions, state your preference of communication, and then say, I want to make sure I'm doing everything correctly, but moving forward, I can limit it to whatever, and then let me know what's appropriate, what's not. And then the other piece of advice would be to try to get answers to your questions moving forward from other like individuals, either within the company, outside of the company, online, instead of that one person, because it can be really overwhelming when one person is responsible for, answering 20, 30, 50 questions a day, which I know it can be a lot. So try to disperse who you're talking to and who you're seeking advice from.
Yeah. And for me, as the one who always has a lot of questions, I went to school for journalism. So that was basically a 4-year degree in asking questions. So that was my whole thing there. And I think at the beginning of my career, I was also this person here. Like, I was probably overwhelming people with too many questions. But very quickly, I had to learn strategies for how to deal with this. The one thing that I always want to keep in mind is the expectation of the people around me, which is when I was hired, they expected me to make their lives easier, not harder. And I'm not saying asking questions necessarily makes their lives harder, but it might create the perception that you are like, making things more challenging for them because they have to put all of that effort up front. Asking questions is not wrong, but we are dealing with a certain perception, and we want to be able to, address that perception and deal with it. One of the things that I do is when I have, I usually ask my manager like, hey, can we set a meeting for this time? Or can I send you an email with a summary of the questions that I have? So that way I am not I'm not distracting them from what they are doing at any given point. They can sit down and have a dedicated moment to look over all of my questions, write down their answers really quickly, and send back an email so I have all of my information. Yes, it's not as instantaneous as I would like. I have ADHD. I would love to have instantaneous answers, but recognizing that, their expectation is for me to kind of compartmentalize and make sure that things are easier for them to support me. That is an extra step that I need to take, unfortunately, as a neurodivergent person. And that's just a reality that, a lot of us have to deal with. So hopefully between my answer and Alex's answer, there's some additional clarity. Alex, do you have any other thoughts before we move on to the next question?
Yeah, I like that you said, like you referred to your ADHD, and I was going to say something that's really hard for me is I'm impulsive. Like that's one of my traits of my ADHD. And so as soon as an idea comes to my head, or like I want to resolve something, I want to do it right now. So exactly as Veronica was saying, like I need an answer now. And so jotting something down and knowing that like it can still be addressed and it doesn't have to be addressed in that moment helps take some of that like urge, I guess, to just go and talk to somebody and ask it right away, because that's what I naturally want to do and it feels like the right thing to me, but not to everyone else, helps. And so yeah, having like a running notebook or a doc or something like that where you can just copy paste, or I guess not copy paste from your brain onto paper, but like, write it out somewhere to know that like you need this addressed or you have a question about it. And then only asking the ones that are urgent. So I was going to say too, that if you need to choose, right, like which question is worth asking, what's not. I think if something is urgent and you can't like do a quick search on Google or ask another coworker or something like that, then I think it's appropriate to decide to ask those questions towards your manager, but differentiating between like urgent questions that if you don't ask, there's maybe going to be a good chance there's some sort of negative consequence or problem, versus being able to judge that like this can wait a little bit. It doesn't feel as urgent. So yes, let me write it down and then try to either figure it out in a little bit or ask it later on.
Absolutely. Let's move on to the next question here. And the question is it possible for coworkers to be friends outside of work? Or is that a really bad idea? How friendly is too friendly? That's a lot of questions, and we appreciate that here. Alex, you might have run into this before. Do you have any thoughts about this one?
Yes, I've run into this in my personal life. I tend to get way too friendly with everyone way too fast, and then it tends to get me in trouble, because if somebody has like a good vibe or good energy, I'm just like, I love you, be my best friend. And then the opposite is like if somebody has a bad vibe or says something, I'm like, I don't want to talk to you ever again. But I think like setting your mind to the fact that like at work, the primary relationship or the primary focus should be the job that you signed up for, the contract that you signed, those expectations. Then following that, if there is somebody that you connect well with, I think it's absolutely okay to develop a deeper connection and potentially a friendship down the line. But I think the mistake that a lot of us neurodivergent people tend to make is, for me at least, it's the impulsivity. I don't know if for other people, maybe it's judging like, or misjudging, whether that person actually wants to be friends or not. And that's where the problem arises. But I always say, like, give it time. So if you have some sort of feeling, you start working, you meet somebody and you're like, this person's really, really cool. Don't pursue like a friendship or a relationship with that person immediately. Just see what happens after like a month, 2, 3, 4 over time. And if it's still a solid relationship where like you guys are friendly at work, you work well together, and maybe they're offering some personal information about their life here and there, and you're sharing like little breadcrumbs, I like to call it, of information, and it seems to be going well, and like both people are continuing to maintain that type of more friendly relationship instead of just solely professional relationship, then absolutely, I think you can kind of move into more of a friendship. I think also boundaries are really important. So understanding that like work is work and personal/friendship is personal and friendship. So if you know for yourself that you're not going to be able to have that boundary, and like if something happens in the friendship, let's say, like let's say you hung out and then that person didn't like it or said something that rubbed you the wrong way, are you going to be able to show up to work the next day and, put on, I think the word is appropriate, your professional mask, and still be able to act professional and do your job, even if somebody is not a friend anymore and was. So I think that's also really important. And so you have to ask yourself some questions, and I wrote some down. But I think some good questions are we still able to give each other feedback or say no at work? So like if you're starting to get closer with somebody, is it still comfortable for you to say no to them if they ask you something that feels, not great, but at work, and vice versa? And then are you both able to avoid favoritism based on the position that you're in? So like with a manager or a boss versus an employee, I think it's really important to consider that before becoming closer with somebody, because if that person is in charge of you at work, or, vice versa, it could create a much harsher dynamic to have to deal with when coming back into work if things don't pan out the way that would ideally pan out in friendship. And then also it's not great if you are being favored too, right? That can create tension with other people at work. So, because I want to give the flip side of like, let's say you befriend your boss and then, you have a great relationship. It tends to happen. I've been in this position. I was best friends with my boss at my old job. It was not a good idea. So take it from my experience, don't do that if you have the chance to. And then are we sharing things we'd be comfortable with others knowing? So I think that's a big one too, is like, if that person is becoming friendlier or friends with you, there's also a chance that they have other relationships at work. And so when you are sharing things, I would just be careful sharing things with that person, especially in the beginning of like a closer friendship, and knowing that you're going to be okay regardless of whether that person maybe mentions something that you said to them in confidence. But again, that word I use a little bit more loosely here, because they work with others, and there's no reason why they wouldn't be pursuing other friendships. And those, Veronica, you're better at words than me, but those lines can get intertangled, I think, very easily. Those strings. I don't know, guys. I talk a lot and it's not always eloquent. Veronica says things a lot better than I do, but hopefully everyone gets the point. Feel free to ask questions if not.
No, I'm totally following what you're saying. And I think just to build on what you're saying, two things popped into my head. Let's see if I can keep my train of thought going here. But one is that we need to remember that in the workplace, especially, relationships have the potential to change. And what I mean by that is, your friend, your coworker at work could become your manager one day. You might end up working in different departments later. You might get bought out by another company, and suddenly, the nature of your working relationship might change. Because of that, that will affect any kind of friendship or relationship that you have with them. So it's important to keep that in mind, and and maybe, as Alex said, figure out what those boundaries that you need to set are. So just in case something like that happens, then you won't kind of be in a pickle, basically. The other thing I will say is that I have been guilty, especially in my early career, of thinking that my work friends were my best friends. And then I realized that after I left the company, or they left the company, they didn't really want to hang out anymore. They didn't really want, and so I would text them and they would ghost me and stuff like that. And I was like, we used to talk every day at work. Sometimes we need to remember that just like in high school, work is like a microcosm of the world. And we're kind of like in a little bubble there. We're kind of like, we go there together every day. So of course we occupy the same space. Of course we're going to develop relationships, but recognizing that, there might be a time limit to those kinds of relationships, and we might not necessarily share the same perspective as the other person. That can be very hard, especially if you have rejection sensitivity or people-pleasing tendencies and things like that. So, keeping that in mind, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't build relationships with people, but we need to build relationships that will serve us for that period of time. And just like any friendship, we like to think that friendships will last forever and ever and ever. But what I've learned in my life is that friendships and relationships in general have seasons. There are seasons where we are going to be the best of friends, and then, we might outgrow that relationship. We might need to move on. Our circumstances might change, and everything. And so it's important to just enjoy the relationship for what it has to offer you in the moment, but recognize when the season is over and it's time to move on, and not kind of hang on to that much. So those were kind of my two thoughts there. Alex, do you have any other thoughts to wrap up this question here?
I just love the seasons analogy, and that very much resonates with me and explains. I wish I would have had that mindset in past roles, because I think that would have helped me. So that's a really great piece of advice. And then I think to wrap up, I would just say one more thing, and that's that a good kind of rule of thumb, if you struggle with this and you feel like it's a challenge, is setting a boundary that you talk about work at work, and that's its own relationship. And then you talk about personal or friendly things outside of work, and not letting those two intertwine. Because I think that's where things become extra tricky, is when you're showing up to work and you're thinking of that person as your friend who has your back. And a lot of my clients have struggled with this, right? They'll be like, well, she's my friend and she did this at work, or she sat in the meeting and didn't back me up, and that was so awkward and not what I expected, and I can't believe it. And that's where I think having a clear understanding of, okay, I'm getting closer with this person, I really like them, but I don't like them just because we work together and they're a good worker. I like things about them that qualify them in my life as a potential friend or some other relationship outside of work. And so being able to view those two relationships as totally separate relationships with, yes, the same person, but not, expecting this person to be able to shit talk somebody from work with you outside of work, if maybe that's their boss or that's a coworker of theirs that they really like or something like that. And I think that can be hard to judge. At least I struggle with it, when I'm talking to somebody outside of work about something work related, it's sometimes very hard to know, is this person appreciating this conversation? Are they vibing with me and think it's funny to kind of gossip a little bit about this? Or are they no, you're crossing a boundary? And so it's much easier to just keep it separate. Talk about your personal life or fun things or whatever outside of work if you have that relationship kind of progressing, and then talk about work-related stuff at work, and tell the person too if you need to, like, I would really love to continue hanging out with you, texting, whatever it is, but like, I just want us to be smart and not run into unnecessary problems. So if it's okay, I'd love for us to have like a separate friendship and a separate professional relationship.
Absolutely. All right. And I do see that we have a raised hand. If you have any questions, please feel free to write it into the chat, and we will try and get to it as soon as we can. In the meantime, let's move on to our next question. And the next question is, my coworker, who I work closely with, talks at me about our work all day long, and I wish she would just use chat or email so I have time to process what she's saying. Is there anything I can do about this? This is really relatable on a lot of levels. So Alex, why don't you take it away? What do you think of this?
Okay, I'm the one with this problem. Like, I'm the chatter in this situation. But I think that people who talk a lot and don't realize how much they're oversharing, like a gentle, like, cue, I guess, to kind of slow down. At least I appreciate it. It might not be everybody. So I think that one way to handle this is to be upfront and to say something like, and I would say it gently. Anytime you're giving somebody, like, let's call it constructive feedback, I don't know if that would be appropriate, but anytime you're trying to tell somebody that what they're doing is like not your favorite thing ever, I would just be gentle with it. But I think I would probably lean into saying something like, hey, I'm not the best at multitasking, and I really want to listen to what you're saying, but I'm also really trying to finish this. So do you mind texting that to me, or like sending it to me in an email? Because I really, really want to know what you're saying. It's just not the best at this very moment. So that's how I would frame it. I would ask the favor, I would request, that they still share, because I don't want to push them away and make them feel like I don't care about them or don't like what they're sharing. But again, if it's causing you not to be able to work or causing you to be overwhelmed, then I think you need to address it.
Absolutely. For me, I am that person that needs to have everything written down. And my excuse usually is, I have a terrible memory. If you want me to do this thing, I would really appreciate it if you sent it to me in writing so that I can reference it later. And by framing it like that, first off, you're not centering them as the problem. The problem is not that they like talking a lot. The problem is more that the way that they prefer to communicate and the way that you prefer to receive information is not necessarily compatible. And I know we talk a lot about like neurodivergent versus neurotypical and everything, but sometimes this particular question in particular, like, it could be two neurodivergent people with very different communication styles just not lining up. And that's not necessarily a bad thing as long as we're able to try and find a compromise. Work is all about trying to figure out a way to collaborate with other people and trying to figure out how you can, make bridge that gap of communication and everything there. So, for this year, I definitely just blame my own memory. A lot of people also say, I have a bad memory, I can't remember names. And usually that's not really seen as like a horrible thing. So yeah, and really framing it as like, if you would like to improve the chances of this getting done in the way that you would like it done, please take this extra step and I will do my absolute best to see it through. And that seems like a really good compromise there. Any other thoughts on your end, Alex, before we wrap this one?
No, I think that was great. And I like what you added.
Okay, perfect. All right. And I just want to pull over here to one of the live questions that we have. And let me see if I can find my other, let me see here. Ooh, no, we went a little too far. Okay. So we have a question here in the chat, and Alex, you can reference it there. It says, I have a coworker who brings up a lot of personal stuff in the context of work, and it makes me very uncomfortable. Some of it even seems like an inappropriate level of sharing, like talking about his religion, some of his wife's personal business. I'm not really sure how to handle it because he might be offended if I asked him to stop. Plus, we work together really often, so things could get awkward awkward or tense very easily. That does sound really uncomfortable, to be honest, especially if you don't want to have that information, like TMI. But Alex, why don't you take the first run at this? What do you make of this?
I guess I have like a follow-up question too. I'm wondering, what is your guys' relationship outside of when he's oversharing about like these personal things? Because I think maybe one of my pieces of advice would be to see if you could kind of back off a little bit and like be more formal and more, I don't want to say cold, Veronica. I don't know if there's a better, like distant maybe is a better word, but I wonder if like I don't know if it's a he also. I don't know if you said that. But
I think they said he, but that's fine. Yeah.
His wife. Yeah. So I think that maybe, and I could be totally wrong, but just off of that message, I wonder if he has the impression that like you're a comfortable, easygoing person at work and, you know, you guys have great rapport, which is awesome if that is the case, that like you've built such great rapport that he feels comfortable talking about anything and everything. But at the same time, I think that participating in those conversations maybe encourages more of them. Not that you're by any means doing it with the intention, but I tend to be the person that's oversharing, and it's hard for me to like self-monitor because that's one of my ADHD, you know, goals that I need to work on and do work on. And so I feel like I mirror how people are. And again, he might not be doing this, but this is just my first thought is like, has he gotten the impression that like you are open to having these types of conversations, you give him any kind of feedback, and now is there a way for you to maybe kind of retract that closeness or that rapport, and not to like break the rapport, you know, and do it carefully, but maybe start to just be a little bit more short. Like if he's bringing anything up and it's not work related, you kind of, let's say you're sitting at a desk or something, you know, maybe you turn and you start typing something and you say, oh, one moment, please, I have an important email to answer. I don't know, whatever is happening, you know, but try to like distance yourself, especially. Hello.
Hi. Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. Like it's a very astute question. So yes, I think that this came about because the boundaries got blurred like a while ago. Like I'm pretty new to the team. Like I've only been on the team 4 months. So there's been a lot of like getting to know each other stuff. And then we went on a work trip to Boston together with another colleague. And so we had like, you know, it was like we're traveling together. Like we had hours in the airport together, like way too much time, really. And yeah, I think the lines got blurred there. And at first, like I also tend to be an oversharer if I'm not paying attention and being careful about that. And I think it took me a while to read the signs that like I was getting uncomfortable with things he was saying. And some of it is like, some of the things he says just happen to push some of my own PTSD buttons. Like, I don't think he's meaning to. He doesn't know that. Like, I'm the only one who can know that.
Yeah.
But now I feel like it's like, yeah, I set a precedent of us, like, of being okay with sharing personal information. And now I'm like, no, I want the walls to back up a bit.
I think the good thing is like, you do have control in that. You can back off. So you can make a decision actively right now that like, I'm not loving where our relationship is at right now, and that he is feeling that this is appropriate to share with me. So, I mean, there's different ways you could handle this, but I think the least kind of like, again, I'm bad with words, you guys. But like the least like abrasive way maybe to handle it would be to just gently back off. And so like anytime he starts to kind of share and you're like, this doesn't feel like a requirement of our job. This doesn't feel like it's adding to the work environment. So let me go like make an excuse, you know, like, oh, I got to go grab some water. Like I'll be back in a little bit or something like that to just like put a pause in that conversation. And then I don't know if you guys are doing written communication as well, or if it's like primarily face-to-face. Yeah. So the written communication too is like, you can make it a lot more direct, you know, and you only are answering like the questions that are being asked or the work that's being brought up instead of bringing up like anything else. Like, hope you had such a nice weekend. What'd you guys do? Oh yeah. And I'll get back to you on that, you know, like just to cut that out. If you're like, I don't want to encourage that. And if I keep opening this door, not that you're doing it on purpose again, but like, I do think he clearly is viewing you as this like nice, friendly person that's like willing to listen to this. And I don't think you have to be that person at work. Like you can just be the professional who has the technical skill set that you were hired to do. And you could be the friendly person with somebody else if that relationship serves you, you know, like you're at work to succeed in your role. And if this guy or anybody is making it harder and you're allowed to like back off, then that's what I think you should try to do.
Absolutely. I would just kind of like build on that here. One of the other ways that you could potentially approach it, if you felt like you if you had the type of relationship that would be able to sustain this, is saying something like, listen, I have a lot going on in my life right now. You don't even have to say what it is. You don't have to say you have PTSD. You don't have to say any of that, but just be like, listen, I've got a lot going on right now. I really need to just kind of compartmentalize and like focus on work right now. So if you wouldn't mind like just kind of keeping conversations to work, it would really, really help me out, and really making it focused on you rather than the focus on him talking too much per se, right? And I know that we have another question in the chat that is on the flip side saying that, hey, like I am kind of a chronic oversharer and like, you know, I might be that one person who is overdoing it. How do I stop doing that? You know, well, you know, first off, like being an oversharer is not inherently a bad thing. Like it's not, it's just like, let's not assign morality to like, you know, these things. We tend to like to share our lives. That's great. We tend to be a little bit more closed off and like, you know, focus on our own thing. That's totally okay too. But the problem comes is when two people's way of communicating end up clashing together. So it's going to be really important to kind of focus on what the signs are of the person who you are communicating with or the people you are communicating with. And it might take some time to learn how to, they always say read the room, which is a little bit easier said than done, but learning how to look for those signs as to like, are people really engaged in the way, in the stuff that you're talking about? If they don't seem engaged, if they seem to be trying to like, you know, divert to other lines of conversations and stuff like that, you know, taking that as a cue to maybe back off a little bit, or like, you know, trying to pick your moments a little bit as to what would be a better setting for you to have this conversation as opposed to not, and everything. So obviously there is no way to kind of give you like a specific formula for how to do that, but it just depends on the situation. Alex, do you have any thoughts about that there?
Yeah, I mean, I loved your reply, and I was going to say something basically exactly along the lines of that, of like trying to play investigator of, you know, how that person communicates, what their tells are, I guess. And that's very hard, especially for autistic individuals when you're in an environment where it appears that most people around you are neurotypical. But I mean, not always, you know, hopefully you're in a nice work environment and people aren't out to judge each other and, you know, make each other's lives more difficult. But unfortunately, I think many people do act that way at work. So you do have to be cautious and really try to read the room, or like read what their tells are, that they're engaged and interested in what you're sharing or not. But I also wanted to comment that your question was, how do I stop oversharing? I don't, like Veronica already said this, but I don't think that oversharing in itself is a bad thing. I actually think that I connect with people a lot more easily because I am more like open and willing to overshare. Like a lot of people will be like, oh, that's hilarious. You know, I'll share something personal and I'll like laugh at myself, and they clearly look a little shocked, but then they start cracking up. And I think it opens up this like informal, relaxed vibe that I have to myself that a lot of people appreciate. And so, Emanuela, I guess that you are somewhat the same, and that people are drawn sometimes to the fact that you are open and you talk a lot and you do overshare. But I just think it depends on the situation. So at work, I think that the first step is awareness, which it seems like you already have. You're aware that you tend to overshare. So that's really important. I think most people who overshare and who are neurodivergent are not necessarily self-aware that they do that. And so it's very hard to modulate like how much they're oversharing or not. But if you know this about yourself, and especially if you're like in a new work environment, getting to know new people, I would just refrain when you can. Just know that about yourself. Remind yourself before like any team meetings or any big meetings to be like, okay, I'm still learning the ropes here. I'm still trying to understand, you know, who's doing what here, who wants to be around me, wants to talk to me, who's too busy for me and is probably going to find me annoying if I, you know, talk to them a bunch and offer up a bunch of information. And then after time, and this is what I had said earlier on, like, I think time tells so much. And so with relationships anywhere, at work, outside of work, I think the most important thing is to not rush. And I think that that's where a lot of problems come from, is that like we don't really get to know each other yet. So we don't know each other's communication styles, or like things that bother one another, or things that one another like. And so then we run into problems because we just kind of go in full fledged with our personalities, which tend to be sometimes clashing to other people. And then there tends to be more problems. Yeah, I see there's a lot of messages. I'm like, Veronica, do you know where we're at?
Don't worry. Yeah, no, I know where we're at. So we do have one more question here that I would love to get to in the live chat. It says, I have an opposite question. Do you have tips to build bridges and relationships at work? I have been told that I come across as kind of also quiet, kind, but also quiet. So people don't think I'm mean, but they don't think of inviting me into conversations and such. So Alex, this is the flip side of the conversation. What do you think?
I love this. This is what most of my clients are like that I coach. So this is right on the nose. I would say that you need to push yourself to find a way to start jumping into conversations. And I don't know where you're at with that feedback, and whether that sounds like the most terrifying thing ever to you and you're like, nope, not doing that. Or maybe you're like, yeah, absolutely, tell me how and I'll try. But I think that would be like just off of reading that would be my little tidbit of advice, is like, if you're noticing that there are opportunities where there's conversations happening and you're not being like pulled into it, it's because a lot of the time people with like established relationships are not like mindful or really going out of their way to like pull in other people. And so the newer person, or the person who's craving or wanting to be included in that, has to kind of gently insert themselves. And so I would love to, I don't know if that's of interest, but I'm happy to share some more specific examples of how to do that. But I think that would be my tip for you, is like, if you're noticing that, you know, you're craving more interactions at work, you're wanting to be a part of more conversations with coworkers or with whoever else, but you're not necessarily being invited in, you need to start kind of trying to slowly cue that you would like to be a part of those by doing different things. That would be great. Okay, I'm happy to share some of those. Veronica, do you want me to jump into that?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. Okay. So I think that one thing to do is like finding a casual space at work where I'm assuming the conversation is more like loose flowing, rather than a conversation that's probably pretty structured or rigid if it's about like a specific project. So I don't know, Sarah, if you work in person or remotely, or what your job setting looks like, but I think it's a lot easier to jump in when there's likely some informal conversation flowing. So lunchtime, if there is like a lunch spot, or depending on where people eat, I think is a great opportunity to, you know, find some people and just introduce yourself. So I would I have the social confidence and also the lack of awareness sometimes and just the impulsivity to like walk up to people that seem like they're having a discussion and appear nice and somewhat friendly, which I don't know how I gauge that. I just don't care. And I'll be like, hi guys, I'm Alex. I'm new here. Just wanted to introduce myself. It's so nice to meet you guys. Like, excited to be here, or whatever else. And so I'll just share what I'm doing or who I am. If you're not as comfortable doing that, then you can start much smaller by just like making a gentle comment about something, anything. So like if they're eating something and it smells good, you know, being like, oh, that smells delicious. And then seeing if they'll engage you in that way. Because usually like a positive comment is something that draws people to you. If they're wearing something too, I would stay away obviously from like anything body related at work. But I think if they're wearing like a pair of earrings that you like and you're curious where they got them, or you know, their coat looks really warm, like things like that as examples, and being like, oh, you know, I'm looking for a winter coat and I couldn't help but notice that yours looks long and very warm. Can I ask you where you got that? So that would be like another idea. And I could go on and on and on and on and on about this because this is what I love. But
for sure. And I would just say, like, if it feels a little bit too overwhelming to be like, to ask everybody this kind of thing, like, you know, maybe start off with figuring out who feels safe at your workplace, who feels like someone who is like the least likely to give you like, you know, any kind of flack or sass or whatever you don't want to. If you can handle sass, that's great. I can handle sass, but some people don't like that. So if you think about like, who is a safe person who is in your workplace? Who would be a person who also has a fair amount of crossover with you naturally in the workplace? Like you guys tend to be in the same meetings, or you tend to collaborate and have to email back and forth with this person or something like that. Just, as Alex said, creating an opening for an opportunity for them to kind of like take the bait. I guess that makes it sound like we're catfishing, but we're not, right? But like basically, like if you put an offering out there, see if they'll take it. And honestly, the thing that's coming to mind is a cat, like, because cats are always on my mind. But like, let's say you offer like a treat to a cat. Now the cat might like it, might not, like they might be a little bit apprehensive, but like, if they accept your offering, then they might allow you to give them a little pat on the head or something. Now, please don't pat your coworkers on the head. But that being said, like, that is kind of like a little thing that kind of came into mind. So yeah, that's what I thought of.
Yeah, guys, don't pet your coworkers.
I feel like I just need to say that just in case. Like, I just want to cover myself, like just in case someone said Veronica said to pat your coworkers on the head, and that would be bad news for me. So anyway, yeah.
I was also gonna say, like, pleasantries go a long way, and I don't know if you already do this, Sarah, but like one easy thing that I think really can't be taken negatively unless you're somehow doing it so awkwardly, or just like maybe if you scream it every time you walk into the office, or I don't know, but coming in and being like, good morning, to whoever, not a little scratch behind the ear. But I think saying like good morning to people, saying good evening, good night, or whatever. I don't know when you're leaving work, but those kinds of like simple little pleasantries are a good way to make yourself noticed at work without like pushing yourself. Like, I think of communication and like communication attempts, which is what Veronica was kind of talking about, as like levels, and there's people who have different comfort with all levels. Like some people are like, give me level 10 challenge and I can conquer it, I don't care. And then there's other people that are like, I need to start with level 1. What is like the easiest first step to try to make myself like more approachable or friendly or chatty at work or anything like that. And so it depends on where you're at right now and what you're willing to do. If you're in a remote environment, it can be nice to schedule water cooler or tea time meetings that are mainly just to catch up with someone in an informal way versus a formal work meeting. And even just scheduling 15 minutes. I often find one-on-one meetings more comfortable than group situations. That's great advice too. I've never heard of anything like that. Like,
I used to do stuff like that when I used to work remotely. Sometimes when I started a new job, or if somebody was new in the company or something, I would message them and say, hey, like, if you ever want to grab a coffee, a virtual coffee or a real life coffee or something like that, I'd be happy to chat with you and like, answer any questions that you have. Or if I was the new person, I would just be like, hey, like, I was wondering if you would take like, 15 minutes out of your day. Like, I'd love to just get to know you a little bit and like, maybe ask some questions just so that we can get on the same page when we're working together and stuff. Like, obviously what you want to do is make it sound like it's in their best interest to take 10 minutes, 15 minutes out of their day to build a small relationship with you. And from there, like, you know what, you can plant the seed. We'll see if it grows. Some of them don't, some of them do. But the important thing is to just kind of like start sprinkling those seeds so that some of them have the opportunity to blossom. And then you see which ones do you want to continue nurturing, which ones yield the best opportunities for you moving down the road. So I think we covered that pretty well, Alex. So if you're cool with that, why don't we go back to our some of our pre-submitted questions. Let's see which one. Oh, this is a good one. I hate it when I feel trapped in a conversation and I never know how to politely excuse myself without somehow offending someone. Do you have any suggestions? Alex, why don't you take this one?
I think that it's kind of hard to offend somebody when you politely excuse yourself. So I guess my question I would pose to people is, what do you guys out there, if you guys don't mind using the chat, but what do you guys consider like politely excusing yourself? And I can give more examples as well if that's helpful, but I would just love to hear from you guys, because I think everyone has a different understanding of this. And I think as long as you are doing it politely, then it would be pretty hard to offend somebody. So my advice to, I guess, answer this question, and I don't know if it directly answers it, but it's to change your mindset and not worry so much about offending somebody and prioritize what it is that you need to get done. Even though I know we naturally, you know, think about our social communication and like how it impacts people and what impression, sorry, my dog decided to bark, and what impression it leaves. And so that's what I would encourage people to think about, because I think you could say sorry, you could say I have to go work on something, you can say you need to run to the bathroom real quick. Like there's a lot of, yep, I'm sorry, to go do blank. Exactly. So there are a lot of things that you can say, and as long as you feel that it is polite and not just like a gotta go, please stop talking to me, or you're taking up too much of my time. I think if you're being mindful about being polite and careful, I don't think that anyone is ever going to find that offensive. But
for sure. For me, I remember practicing exit phrases, especially when I go to networking events, especially if like, you know, I need to move on or something like that. So, you know, some of the things in a networking situation, which could also apply to like a work situation as well. Things like, you know, oh, like I just saw someone who I need to say hi to. We can continue this conversation later, which is promising that like, you know, hey, like if we run into each other again, we can continue our conversation with like, I'm not trying to cut you off. Or things like, you know, okay, like, you know, I'm going to go grab a drink. I'll catch up with you later, or something like that. You know, coming up with like these nice generic phrases that work for a lot of different scenarios, and you know, you have them practiced and in your back pocket, so you don't have to think about what is the right way for me to exit this conversation. You can just pick one and go with it. You know, same thing with starting conversations as well. I know that this person didn't ask about starting conversations, but we talked earlier about like, you know, asking about, you know, this is why people with small talk about the weather all the time. They don't actually care about the weather. They just want to start the conversation about something that both of you understand and something that both of you can comment on. So, you know, commenting on someone's nice warm winter coat, as Alex said earlier, commenting on, you know, like, how was your weekend or something, and showing interest in them. Even if you don't really care about what they did on the weekend, like, you know, just like giving an opening for them to share a little bit about themselves and for you to be able to key off of it. So I would definitely recommend like coming up with a couple of like maybe 3 phrases for like, you know, starting conversations and 3 phrases for exiting conversations that you can just have in your back pocket, so you don't have to like do that guessing game in the moment when you have the person staring right at you, because that can be really intimidating. Yeah. Anything else you would add to this, Alex?
No, to me, I just reread this question actually too, and I was thinking about it more about like the first part of the phrase, that I hate it when I feel trapped. And so to me, that like this goes back to, it's a mindset shift a little bit, but I love what you said about coming up with phrases that hopefully will make you feel less trapped, because you don't have to sit there and be like stressed of, I don't know how to do this politely, so I'm just going to stand here and smile even though I need to go, or, you know, they're oversharing and I don't have the time for this, or whatever it is. So I think being prepared is one way to help yourself, and then not doubting yourself. So like not being like, I'm going to exit this conversation and they're going to be so mad at me or annoyed at me. Like you needing to go and prioritizing a different part of your day, or like what you need to get done at work instead of just yapping, is not something that you need to be like sorry for or careful about or anything. But I do think the way that we say things and the tone that we use tends to suggest how we're feeling. So if you, again, just say like, I don't want to talk about this anymore, I'm going to go, then yes, that might not be polite. That might rub people the wrong way. You might run into a problem. But as long as you're saying like, I'm so sorry, I have to run, or I'm going to excuse myself, I got to go do this, I really think just practice some phrases if this is your question or your struggle, and hopefully, you know, practice it. You could practice also with a friend or a family member, or somebody you feel comfortable with, if you need to build up your confidence a little bit before you do this at work. But you can do it.
Well said. Well said. I think we have time for one or two more questions depending on how it goes. So let's see what the next one is. This one says, last week I CC'd my manager in an email and she told me that I shouldn't do that anymore unless it's really important that she knows. How am I supposed to know what she perceives to be important? Alex, do you have any thoughts about this one?
Yeah, I think if you don't know your manager yet and you haven't established a relationship, I think it's great to communicate with them that, hey, I want to make sure that I'm putting what needs to be on your radar on your radar. Do you mind just giving me like a rundown of general things that I should be CCing you on versus other general things that you don't really need to see, and then I can kind of follow those guidelines. I do think that this is hard. I think also reminding yourself that you likely got hired for the role, not always, but you likely got hired for the role because you have some skills that align appropriately with the job. And so trusting yourself to handle different situations and only CCing somebody when you're like, okay, I really do feel like they need to be on this because. So I would be asking myself like, okay, what is the reason why I think it's really important for my manager to be on this email? Another thing too, if it's hard for you to do that perspective taking, and if you're just starting and you have coworkers that you work alongside, asking them like, hey, I know you know this manager better than me. Is there something that you've noticed, they appreciate being CC'd on versus not, I think is a good way to take like a temp check, to make sure that you're doing things right. But ultimately too, I think it's okay to be CCing your manager on everything you feel is important for them to see. And then if you get this kind of feedback, right, if the manager says like, hey, you don't need to CC me on everything unless it's really important, I would just proceed with caution after that and really limit the amount that I am CCing this manager, because clearly they're telling me what I was doing before was not what they wanted. So I'd be like, okay, they don't want eyes on it unless I'm like, no, this one they absolutely need to see.
Absolutely. I think it also comes down to what is the nature of this manager here. Some managers are the type that just don't want to they don't want to explain why. They just want to tell you to do it the way that they want it to do, but they don't necessarily know what's important. They just know that they got annoyed when they saw it and then they reacted and everything. So recognizing that if that is the case, that is not necessarily on you. That is a them problem. And so you should not, you might still feel bad about it, and there's nothing wrong with feeling bad about it, but you don't really have much reason to, because really the issue is on their end. Now, if they are open to communicating about this and establishing what it is, one of the things that I might consider doing is putting together an email or a message just being like, hey, I know that you mentioned that you would like me to only CC you on things that are important. From now on, I'm going to CC you on these types of emails, but I will refrain from these types of emails. Is this okay for you? And that gives them, first off, it doesn't require them to come up with the ideas. You're the one taking the initiative, coming up with the ideas. And then from there, all they have to do is say check or no, I actually mean this or something. And that might be a really easy way to kind of get clarification without putting as much effort on the manager. Now, that being said, it does put a little bit more work on you, but hopefully that effort that you put in will pay off in the long run, so that you guys will be on the same page about what is important and what is not. So that is my recommendation there. Yes. Anything else you'd like to say about this one, Alex?
No, I think we summarized it well.
Absolutely. And yeah, I see in the comments here, someone said it's helpful to provide a bi-weekly summary of current projects and issues. I used to do that in my old job too. I knew my manager was super busy. So once a week or whenever I needed it, I would send them a list and be like, this is the stuff that's outstanding. These are the things I have questions on. So again, they have it all in one place. They have a dedicated mind space to it, and they can just answer everything at once instead of you kind of pulling them away with each question, and everything just kind of goes back to the very first question we talked about. So yes, I do think that that's a fantastic recommendation. Let's try to do one more, Alex. Let's run one more question here. And it says, in my last performance review, it said that I need to be more professional at work because I don't really talk to my colleagues and I just come in and do my work and leave. How do I force myself to make small talk when I don't want to? And I hate that we have to force ourselves to do small talk. Like, you know, I don't think but at least me and Alex, we don't do small talk. When we first met, like we just went straight.
We do huge talk. We do
huge talk. Yeah. And so I understand that it's so, and the other thing that's really annoying about this, at least from my point of view, is the term be more professional. What the heck does that even mean, right? That's such a huge question. And everybody defines professional a little bit differently. For some people, it is come in, do the work that you're supposed to do it well, and go home. For some people, it is, you know, put on that show and show that you are a personable person who also does their work and does absolutely everything for them. So really, being professional is kind of like, you know, it kind of varies from person to person. So that can make it even more complicated to deal with here. You know, make it forcing yourself to do small talk. You know, if you do feel like this job is something that you want to maintain, that you think that it's a really good environment for you, and this is like one of the few little things that you have to do to kind of like improve your life, then maybe you can learn some tips about small talk, and maybe Alex has some ideas that you can kind of put forward here. But if you yeah, like I hate the idea of forcing small talk, but that being said, I understand it might be a survival skill in this scenario, especially if you really, really want to maintain this job and everything. So Alex, what do you think of this? I know I just kind of took over answering this question, but what do you think?
I think this is I hate it because it's very not neurodiverse affirming, just not affirming in general. If I'm coming to work and I'm doing, well, okay, here's a point I didn't consider. I guess one important consideration would be what was under your job title? Like, what did you sign up to do? And what parts of it? Like, I would almost take my job offer or my job description and put it through ChatGPT and be like, does this job require me or like suggest that it's important for me to be strong at small talk or like communication outside of the bare necessity of what needs to happen to complete my workload or like the technical job, whatever. And I think that that is an important like consideration here, because if you're being ranked or reviewed somehow and you're getting, my God, what is it called? You're getting, oh, wow, word finding. You're getting what? Help me. You're getting points off. That's not what I'm trying to say.
Oh, yeah, you're getting reprimanded. Maybe?
Not even that. Like, you're getting points reduced. Somebody's out there and knows exactly what I'm saying. Please put it in the chat and save me from this word finding embarrassment. But anyway, if they're taking off points off of your like performance review or giving you this discipline, demerit's a good word. I like that. But yeah, basically like they're lowering your score or your review because of this, then I would really want to know that like it was an expectation of mine to participate in small talk or communication outside of like immediate projects, assuming that this person is doing a good job within their role based on what they signed up to do. Because if this is an added expectation, I would probably fight back. I mean, not fight back, but, you know, I'd be like, okay, so I'm a bit confused. Under my job title is this, this, and that. You are telling me that I am excelling here, meeting expectations here, excelling at this, meeting expectations. Why is my ability to be professional in small talk being brought up or being considered when it comes to my performance review? Like, I just don't understand. And so I would kind of throw the ball back at them, put the ball in their court and be like, please tell me. And then based on the response that they would give, like maybe if they said something like, well, we're considering you for a promotion, and in order to be promoted, we need you to have strong communication skills and be good at like team building. And that involves, okay, then I would be like, okay, thank you. That makes a little bit of sense. I appreciate that, you know, you're considering me for this role. And then maybe think about this role could be a good fit for me. I'm excited about this. I'm definitely going to put in effort to like try to increase my small talk or my communication with coworkers. If that's not the case, then I would be like, if I don't want it, or if I don't consider that one of the skills I'm willing to kind of dedicate energy and time to being better at work, I would say this isn't under my job description. You seem to be telling me that I'm doing a great job at the actual job that I'm being paid to do. So I'm a little confused why I'm being told that like this is a factor. But yeah, that's just how I would handle it. And again, Veronica had a great point. It depends on how badly you need this job or how much you want to stay in the position, because the answer you receive might be you either do this or else. And then, you know, you're going to have to be okay with being like, no, goodbye, you suck. Or being like, okay, yes, I will do it because I need to keep this job, but I hate you.
Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully, my hope is that, you know, after a conversation, they might just drop it. If they keep hounding you for something that is not part of your just a job description, it's not necessary. Like you're not like, I'm assuming this person is not in sales. Like, you know, if you're in sales and you need to be making small talk as part of your job, I get it. But like, if you're like in IT or something, like, I don't think that that's very necessary. And if they continue bothering you about it, and if it's making your life miserable, it might be time to find a culture that actually aligns with you. So with that said, I think that brings us to the end of our presentation here. I just want to say again, thank you so much to Alex for providing her you know, expertise and insights to our conversation. You can learn more about Neurodiversity Connection on her website. Alex, do you want to say anything about this that I haven't mentioned before?
I would love to connect with you guys. I'm trying to build up my own little community. I'm still much newer to this than Veronica, and I look up to Veronica. But yeah, if you guys ever want to connect or message me or work with me, or I have my own little Facebook group too, where you could sign up to be there or get email updates. I'm going to run some social groups in the new year as well. So I'll be excited to send out info about that. And thank you all for being here and contributing.
Amazing. Thank you.
I can. Let me do that right now while you wrap up, Veronica.
Absolutely. And I just want to mention myself really quick here. As I mentioned, I am the career coach behind Atypical Careers. I do help neurodivergent professionals build a sustainable work life and, you know, break the neurodivergent burnout cycle here, which is something that I think we've all kind of dabbled in a little bit. So feel free to email me. My email is right there. You can also find me at atypicalcareers.com, which I will put in the chat right now. So feel free to visit us there. Otherwise, that is pretty much everything for today. Thank you so much for coming and being here. We will be sending out a recording to all the people who have registered for this session afterwards, and there will be a little recap. I just need to write it up, so give me a week or two. But with that said, thank you again for coming. Thank you so much for engaging in this conversation, and hopefully we'll be able to see you all in the new year. So take care.
Bye, everyone. Thanks.
Bye, everybody. I'm gonna turn off the recording. So let's see here.